right, Blair, this is cool for me because it's actually the first person we've had on Leaders Who Care who is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I love Halifax and I love Nova Scotia. So welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here.
Great to be here, eh? That's what you're supposed to say.
I can't give in to all the stereotypes for Canadians, Mark.
I can. Welcome. This should be a fun conversation and really informative too, because of all the good stuff that you're involved in. Let's start though by, if you can briefly introduce yourself. We'll get to the business and all that first, but who's Blair? Where you from? Where you are now? Family? Favorite color? Something you've never told anybody ever and you want to reveal it to the world now? Stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Blair Kirchner. I was born just outside Toronto. Lived there until I was 4 years old. The summer I turned 5, moved with my mother to the South Shore of Nova Scotia. In a small town called Shelburne is where I grew up. And during that period, it was very interesting to grow up in rural Nova Scotia. Let's just put it that way. And then moved to Halifax about 11 years ago with my wife and daughter, which is where we reside now, just outside Halifax in the Peggy's Cove area.
Nice.
Have been with my wife for 21 years, high school sweethearts, believe it or not.
Wow.
Our daughter is now 12 years old. Favorite color is red. Something I haven't told anyone. Well, maybe not too surprising to anyone who has sisters, but when I was younger, I did have a sister convince me to try on one of her dresses, which I did. And there is photographic evidence somewhere. I've been trying to obtain it and get rid of it, but I think it does still exist. So there you go. That's me, Mark.
All right, the sister has leverage. No, that's great. I think people should check out Nova Scotia. It's a great place for families to be and grow up, and less expensive than Toronto.
No kidding on that, for sure.
So what were you like then as a kid or a teenager? Were you like, remember the show Michael J. Fox was in when he was like an entrepreneur type of guy?
Mm-hmm.
Were you doing the lemonade stand thing? Were you playing video games, sports, music? What were you like?
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly really into sports. I mean, hockey was my gig when I was a teenager. Loved it. It was really, what I spent the vast majority of my time doing, whether it was, street hockey or ice hockey,
Yeah.
depending on the time of year. Really into music as well. Had a really nice stereo system, tons of CDs. Back before it was all digital. But certainly had an entrepreneurial bug as well, Mark. I was constantly setting up yard sales within my house. I was lived in a rural outside the town even more. So there was no setting up on the side of the road. You might see 5 cars in a day, and they certainly weren't stopping to buy anything. So try to sell things primarily to my sister again. Whatever I might have that I thought I didn't need, and she might want to buy. My mother founded and ran a health food store. So I helped her there wherever I could, which again continued to feed the entrepreneurial bug. We had a really small scale farm, so I raised chickens, sold eggs, those sorts of things at a, again, relatively small scale. And honestly, when I was about 12, I started to apprentice with my father at Kirchner Group every summer. So spent 2 months really mirroring what he was doing. So from meetings to calls to notes, debriefing, travel, early mornings, all that stuff. Really understanding the business world. So certainly had some entrepreneurial genes in me from both sides, I guess, as I grew up.
Yeah, sounds like it. Health, food, and impact on all sides here, type of thing. I hope he paid you more than minimum wage for that. Or not too much less. Not to get off track, but you mentioned music. I saw the documentary on when they created the "We Are the World" song.
Mhm.
Really good and really emotional actually too, how it developed. So you probably love it based on that background in music. Really, really cool. Let's look at your journey a little bit. You talked about, interning or spending time with your dad there. Um, what were you envisioning in your early 20s? Your sales, customer experience prior to joining Kirchner. What were your thoughts? What were you thinking the future looked like?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly spent, to a minimal extent, time with my father and Kirchner Group, throughout the time since apprenticing to sort of joining full time, I guess, 15, 16 years ago now. Um, but I was really, trying to spread my wings and figure out what I wanted to do, frankly. I did some work in small scale agriculture, really enjoy the outdoors, farming, gardening. So, I spent some time with a blueberry farming operation in Shelburne. Um, did some construction labor. That's a trait that's obviously very important to understand. Even though I didn't retain too much of it, it was fun at the time. Um, and I spent some time with an IT multinational, so on the front lines. Really, that was where I got my first experience with customer service in sort of a B2C context. Um, over the 9 months I was on the floor there, I led the company in sales, and this was while working sort of what they called the graveyard shift, which was the last shift that the call center was open before it switched over to Asia to take the overnight strict overnight hours. Um, and then got promoted there to supervisor and really sort of started to understand a little bit about trying to be a manager and trying to lead individuals in their tasks and in their day-to-day activities on the front line. So, ultimately, I guess I was trying to figure out, how best to provide a living for myself and my girlfriend at the time, obviously now my wife. Um, at the same time, finding something that was fulfilling for me as a career or job or whatever path to take that was rewarding and had the appropriate financial side of things to sustain a living.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. It's always been interesting having you working at something that you love to make an impact and making money at the same time. When I tell my story a little bit, I came down from Canada, but I actually offered my dream job with the Winnipeg Jets, by the way, back then. But I was also offered a job at JC's International, which is a global nonprofit, for 60% less salary than the Jets offered me. And the only person that told me to take that job was the president of the Jets that offered me the other job. And because it was some weird thing that people thought you had to give up money to make a difference, or just make money because of greed and don't care about anything else. And luckily, and we'll get into that, and we don't have to do that anymore, hopefully. We founded our firm, Fifth Element, on the premise that leaders and their organizations can do way better when they are doing good. And you certainly, and you can tell in the thread, have a clear understanding, I think, early in your life that is real. How did you come to decide then to joining the Kirchner private, what's called the private capital group, and you're working M&A, you're working, research analysis, etc. Number one, and tell us a little bit about some of the engagements you were in, and how, if and how decisions and deals have changed over the years because of stuff like making an economic and social impact at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think just first off, it's certainly always been our philosophy as an organization to, come at things from a values perspective and, what we call earning and returning, the belief that one can do good and do well at the same time. And certainly for me personally and philosophically, that's been a strong tenet for me. Um, I think in addition to that, there's evidence from our perspective that the reason we've been around for as long as we have is because of that orientation and been as successful as we have over, for going on 40 years now. Just another quick anecdote before I talk a little bit about, my path there. I've got a colleague who we work with in various capacities who isn't inherently an impact or wasn't inherently an impact investor, but has been investing in the VC space for 20 plus years. And they recently did a full review of their portfolio and their exits over those 20 years and came to the conclusion that all of their best performing investments were actually underpinned by impact, positive social impact.
Wow.
And is an interesting, anecdotal comment to your theme that, in fact, that may be a competitive advantage as opposed to, having to accept lower returns or lower revenues or lower income for an individual. So,
Sure.
um, I think the draw primarily for me to jump in with Kirchner Group full time was the ability to look at business in a different way, and in a way that I felt had to be coming to more mainstream thinking. Clearly, when the organization was founded back in 1985, it wasn't really anything anyone talked about, frankly. And the design of the firm was intentionally a boutique, values based, and in the form of a traditional merchant bank. So the ability to have high touch, customized approach, really leverage the expertise and experience of seasoned operators and industry professionals for the benefit of small and medium sized enterprise and their stakeholders. And in that regard, working across the life cycle of a company, from startup through to exit, and then additionally over the last 15 years added managing assets, entire portfolios on behalf of limited partners. So when I first started, Mark, I was really on the M&A side of the practice. So our niche there is sell side mandates to strategic buyers. So I was helping build target lists. I was helping to make outreach, cold calls, emails, developing materials, so teasers, company presentations, those sorts of things for really innovative companies that, as you would know, entrepreneurs spent years in building to the point where it's time to find, sounds cheesy, but it's forever home, right? Someone who could come in and have the resources behind them to really see it to its final fruition of potential. So as I continued to work through that, I started to dabble in other sides of the practice, be that sort of the early stage work with commercialization of IP and enterprise development, the more hands-on operational approach, interim management, workouts, turnarounds, on the ground, operational support. And then, as I said, over the last sort of 10, 15 years, providing some assistance in the asset management side of things, working with entire portfolios. But really all underpinned by the fact that, we pride ourselves on bringing pragmatic solutions to problems and challenges, and working with companies that have an underpinned impact, social positive impact to them, and bringing the ability to look at things without financial engineering or a cookie cutter approach, out of the box, off the shelf kind of mentality, and really work with our clients to provide what they need, not what they don't, not a hammer looking for a nail. And I think that's, for groups like ours that do what we do, I shouldn't say like ours, but do what we do, that's often not the way they look at things. They're convincing the company that they need what you sell, as opposed to what do you need, and let's figure out how we can address it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We ask a question a lot for different reasons. We say, what's important to you?
Yep.
And it's amazing. And let's face it, founders of companies, for the most part, that's their baby. And it's somewhat
Absolutely.
emotional, like your home. It's business, but somewhat emotional. And they do want to make money. But deep down, somewhere in there, they are doing it for a reason. They're not just
Yep.
selling plumbing supplies. And even that could be for a reason, because they want things to flow properly or whatever. But
No.
Yeah, it's I found that interesting in getting a chance to talk to you and your colleague Hattie and your dad, that you seem to be far ahead of the curve in how you engage with people. And I had a Deloitte partner told me years ago, brilliance is simple, and it sounds like you've got that down in that respect. The related to that, the fourth industrial revolution is about technology, now AI big time, and so on and so forth. But the fifth has been said to be about humanity. And we focus on our firm on how impact and talent and impact all come together, and as an omniwin, if you will. Can you describe um, how the Kirchner um, Impact Foundation, the your vision, your mission came about, how it evolved over the years? And where I was told this, I read it, around the problem of making small dollar impact investments in places where they're needed the most. Can you share about that?
Yeah, so the concept behind our impact foundation is really, based on what I mentioned earlier, that mentality or philosophy of earning and returning. So in the visual that we like to use is sort of a virtuous circle, so that there isn't defined lines, but they blend together very nicely, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and so the mission is really, for the Impact Foundation, is really to leverage the power of enterprise, to solve some of the significant problems of our time, using what we call the head, hip, and heart approach, which is really, the expertise and experience that we've learned over the decades in business. The hip being the sort of essential financial resources, and the heart is really the passion, the desire, to make a difference, and to approach things with empathy and compassion. Um, and so the foundation itself was, formalized, if you will, 10 years ago, as a 501(c)(3) in the US, and has focused to date, primarily across three sectors: agriculture and food, health and life science, and education. And the flagship program of the foundation is what we call the Kirchner Impact Investment Initiative, which is really, consists of a multi-pronged four pillar approach, which include our fellowship program, our investment academy, our actual equity investments, and then the deal pipeline. So maybe just briefly to expand on each one of those.
Hmm.
So our fellowship program, in a nutshell, is designed to introduce, impact investment to university students through a real world, hands-on, academic year-long program. Um, our investment academy is designed to be a, for lack of a better term, quick and dirty introduction to impact investment through sort of a boot camp style, call it 2-day program, primarily for entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs in underserved communities or countries or regions, where knowledge of equity investment just really isn't that mainstream, frankly.
Okay.
Um, and then our equity investments is obviously the investments that are made through our fellowship program. So within that, the students are actually given discretion over a pool of capital to execute on a real investment that then sits within the portfolio of our impact foundation. And then our deal flow pipeline is really the companies that have been found by these fellows, over the 10 years that we've run the program, and help to feed understanding of, entrepreneurial activity within countries, within regions, within communities, um, develop or essentially be able to define innovative solutions in a particular subsector. Primarily, the fellowship's been focused on agriculture and food. So it gives us that intel, if you will, and insight into early stage innovation and companies, um, that, that we've seen over the years. So that's sort of the concept of the Impact Foundation and the mission behind it.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and the three areas that you're focusing on, food and ag, life sciences, ed. to say the least, they're the most critical areas out there right now. They're the most critical areas that AI is going to impact, probably,
Mm,
um, and so on and so forth. And I find it interesting, thinking back to what you said before, we always find threads in our conversations, and we found it by accident, but, you know, you were, doing, selling eggs, doing on blueberries, side ag stuff when you were a kid, stuff like that, and you never knew you were going to end up in Halifax also, type of thing. And here you are in the food and ag business and health and everything. Um, it's just interesting how things evolve. Whether it's influencers, which we'll talk about in a minute, or interests that are deep inside us and that you make an impact on. So, with respect to those food and ag and all of them, they're all connected. Food's connected to ag, ag to
yep.
food. Well-being is connected to that. It's not all these separate silos. Can you talk about how you develop a strategy that's an overview, but then also very specific on solving stuff like food security, which we're super active in as well, and leveraging the young people that you're working with, I think is amazing. So they can lead on funding, on finding and creating opportunities, creating innovations, basically to bring about change, because they're smart.
Yep.
They bring new stuff to the table that we need to know, and also how, and I think I'm quoting on this somewhere, you have a diverse and inclusive capital allocation. And I love this word, to endure for the business. It's more than sustainability, it's actually enduring, which I think is different. And then how that impacts, long question, I know, how that impacts people professionally, but also personally, because it goes down into the family, it goes down into the community, what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on some of it there. The reality is, the younger generation, if I can call it that, just bring a new way of thinking and approaching things. They're not afraid to look for support or develop a new disruptive solution to something that maybe hasn't even been thought of for
Right.
hundreds of years. Um, Really, the innovative ways in which we've seen our fellows and the next generation in finding companies that are doing innovative things, um, the ways to conduct diligence. And I don't mean this in that they don't do it fully, but in even shortcuts to diligence. Ways in which they can get to the bottom of whether this is real or not quicker than frankly most, maybe not most, but a lot of investors,
Yeah.
and everything in between. It's just a whole new way of thinking for a generation that has been raised on, frankly, the ability to access all information that ever existed at their fingertips, and the inherent ability to leverage that and break the mold. That's been really, an incredible, thing for us to witness, and it's I can't say we can take any credit for that. Like, that's just who they are and what they do. We give them the platform to do it, but it's them, not us. I think the ability also to work in regions and communities that are underserved or underrecognized, particularly by the capital markets, is super important to us, and I think has resulted in a more profound impact, um, overall. Maybe just to touch on a bit of the pillars
Mm.
individually in terms of some of the impact and sort of the activities. So the fellowship program now has 50 plus alumni, that represent over 20 countries, gender parity. Um, the most rewarding thing I have to say is and it almost happens at least once a year with the program with a fellow, that they really go out of their way to say, this has changed my career trajectory. Like, this really has opened my eyes to the potential to make a positive impact through, whether it's investing, through, frankly, conscious capitalism, that I never realized was there before. We've had numerous individuals go through the program and come to work with us at the Impact Foundation to perpetuate the model, to expand it into Costa Rica is a great example, where we had a group of fellows that came to work with us and stand up the program in that country. Um, on the investment academy side, we've had over 1,000 participants come through that program now.
Mhm.
Um, through over 25 programs with all kinds of different organizations, from government bodies in Central America to not-for-profit organizations in the U.S. and elsewhere. And what I think is most impressive to me is that, based on the post academy surveys, we have about a 99% satisfaction rate. That mean they're getting something out of that program that they didn't know, and that's going to benefit them as they continue their careers, whether it's as entrepreneurs or whether it's trying to break into the capital allocation space. They've taken something away from that. Um, our portfolio, we don't have a large portfolio, but we have a strong impact oriented portfolio. Companies like Cooley, which is a CPG company with products based on moringa. They've generated over $6 million for smallholder farmers, primarily women in Africa. Planted over 30 million trees, in 7 years of existence or 8 years of existence. Tomato Joss is a integrated tomato production facility in Nigeria that has an incredible extension and outgrowing program for local farmers in the country. And they've created the best yields in Nigeria for tomato crops, and increased those smallholder farmers' income by 2 to 3 times. And then Selena, which is a unearthing, no pun intended, maybe pun intended, biological capital for agricultural producers. Really helping to protect and support soil health and biodiversity, a whole new way to look at it that is revolutionizing things across the U.S. and Mexico and other countries in the world. So it's just the innovation of the students to find these types of companies and do the diligence and execute on the investments, and then we get to talk about how great the impact is that they're making, is just incredibly rewarding personally for me. And then finally, the database side of things, like over 1,500 early stage companies in the impact with an impact orientation, looking to positively impact the ag and food space around the world. And the ability to see that is pretty special. Just to know that there's that many companies out there that are trying to make a difference. And look, we both know they're not all going to succeed, and they may not all be great ideas, but they're out there, taking an at bat and trying to make a difference. And that's pretty special to me.
You might even say they're actually leaders who care. Who would
You
have thought?
might even, Mark. You might even.
No, that's spectacular. We talk a lot about diversity, and very often, and rightly so, it's about diversity of race, of this, that, or whatever. But the real diversity is the diversity of innovation, diversity of experiences, diversity of new ideas. That's real diversity. And I remember someone once said, whether it's refugees or young people or whatnot, who knows how many Einsteins are in that group that we need to uncover, or cure for cancer, or whatever, all that stuff. And it's true. Give them the platform like you're giving, the opportunity, the confidence, the self-esteem, all the words you want to think of. There's brilliant stuff that can come out. And even when I'm, attracting top talent to our clients, the candidates I love the most that are, let's say, even older, saying, I'd love to work with a younger person, share my experiences, but learn from them. Brilliant stuff to hear when I hear that, versus, well, that person younger than me, I can't report to that person.
Mhm.
Missing the boat, totally,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So good for you on all of that. And, you know, we'd love to actually highlight, we can talk about that, some of the companies you're talking about, which I think would be fantastic too. But to conclude, in LA, we always say, leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So I guess we may have to do that. But I do have a last question here. And one client told me a few years back about the year 2020. He said, 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought, what a great line.
Yeah.
And it feels sometimes like the pandemic was yesterday and years ago, all at the same time. It's really kind of weird. So with all that said, can you share, what you're most grateful for and what you're most hopeful for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a deep question for sure. I mean, I think grateful. I think I'd have to say opportunity. Like, I think we sit on the precipice of an incredible moment in time with the innovation that's happening, the technological advances, artificial intelligence you've referenced already. I mean, I think there is such opportunity in front of us as mankind, as humankind, I should say, to quite literally and because we need to save the world. So that's what I'm grateful for. That I think we have the ability to do it. Um,
Yeah.
that
And
that's what I'm grateful for.
and I guess hopeful for at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, that the hope is that we take advantage of that opportunity in a positive way, right? Not exploit it for personal or siloed gain. Like, I mean, I think it's so easy for that to to take hold, and that's the worst possible outcome of the opportunity, right? I personally would love to see, the whole human decency, compassion, empathy, like those need to be the viral trends, Mark, of 2024. Not a TikTok dance or whatever, else may be going viral out there. If we can just get back to that fundamental human decency and empathy for everyone, I think we come a long way to ensuring that we don't get off track in leveraging the opportunity in front of us for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, well said. Which will remind me to speak to you about the global partnership of Aegis Trust and Million Peacemakers on Nonflict. So we'll talk about that. But thanks for being a leader who cares, and your family and colleagues like Hattie and others that I know there, and for sharing all of that. Really appreciate it. So thanks a million.
I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity.